Look at this. It's showtime. Welcome along to the weekend review. I'm Ben. It's good to be here. Give us a follow at Ben Pierce Talks, as I've been debating all week about the VAR decisions at the London Stadium between Manchester United and West Ham on Sunday. I finally get to let off some steam. So you see some steam coming out here. Don't call the fire brigade. They don't need to come to my house. It is me letting it rip because I've got a few things to say on the fact that Ronaldo didn't get at least 2 penalties at the weekend. We'll also be talking about brilliant Brighton and the Chelsea favourites plus Liverpool. Are people not giving them enough credit after their start to the season? I mean, they're joint top with us, right? Join us on the show. Get in the live chat. It'd be good to hear your thoughts as we talk, and we'll head over to Stu, James and Mark after this. Click subscribe to get daily Manchester United content from Passionate Reds, only on All for United. It's All for United. Hit subscribe, hit a like on this, share the link. If you're on Twitter, hit the retweet button, get involved in the live chat. Let's have a big debate about some fantastic action in the Premier League again this weekend. Sorry, we were meant to do this live at 1 o'clock on Monday, but I had to be a dad for the day. Bonkers. I know, right? I had to be a dad for the day. So we've jumped on today instead. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you. You know, you've been having a busy day. James, you do nothing because you're a former student. And Stu, well, we'll see how many times he tells us he's got hay fever during the show, but it'll be quite a few. So let's get the hay fever bingo going. Thank you guys for coming on. Look, there's no point in really going over massively United's performance. We've done that on Uncut and in the review show. But I think, James, just quickly reflecting on the weekend's action, it was a fantastic 3 points for United, even at such an early stage, wasn't it?
Yeah. People are trying to downplay it in any way they can, but that's for ulterior motives. 3 points at West Ham, especially with the performance as well, where we were pretty dominant for probably 70% of the game at least. Result and performance against a team of that caliber. This was West Ham who were challenging for Champions League last year. So away from home, it is a great result and a great performance as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've seen a few, I don't know if you've seen them, Stu, a few writers and journalists this week talk about United not controlling the game at the weekend. And I think there's a myth around what controlling a game actually ensues and actually partake, so to speak. West Ham didn't create an awful lot of clear chances. United had the better of the ball. And I think ultimately, if we go back and win the game, you can't say United didn't deserve to win it, even in the fashion that we did. So what do you make of all that, Stu?
Well, look, the funny thing is you don't have to control a game of football to win it. You just got to score more goals than the opposition. And how you go about doing that sometimes doesn't really matter. Yes, you tailor-make your play to the opposition. Yes, you do formations. You set yourself up to play a certain style. But ultimately, it's winning a game of football. And I think what you're getting at the moment is a lot of the fan base, because they're so divided towards whether Ollie should be the gaffer and shouldn't be the gaffer. They're just clutching at any little tiny straw to have a go at him. It's like almost a stick to beat him with. And it's becoming a bit pathetic, really, because I'll go back to it. The bottom line with football is you're scoring more goals than the opposition and you win it. And how you do that is how you do that on the day. I thought we had a certain measure about us, to be honest. You're absolutely right, Ben. West Ham didn't have much control, didn't create much. West Ham were looking more for, at points, counter-attacking football. But what they are is quite an exciting team at the same time. And when you've got the likes of Jared Bowen, who just loves being in the Premier League, if you think about where he's come from to where he is today, he just loves playing football, just loves being in the Premier League. And he's going to give you that intensity because, his time may well be limited in the Premiership. Who knows? He doesn't know that. And so from our point of view, I think it was a workmanlike victory. And I'm delighted. I was absolutely delighted. James, I'll tell you, I was smiling, and I never smile. Yeah. So from that point of view, I just think it's an agenda, and I think it's a pretty poor agenda, really, what people are saying.
I've put that online as well. I feel like people are overlooking our first 3 away games and how tricky they are at any stage of the season. Away to Southampton's never easy, despite us having good form there of recent. Away to Wolves, always a tricky game. Again, overshadowed by the fact that it was a nothing match at the end of last season when we played the kids. And away to West Ham. We've never, ever, we've been all right there, but we've always sort of struggled. We've had moments there which have, so to speak, shaken up the history of that fixture. But yeah, tricky game. Just quickly, going to come to each of you before I give the say to Mark on this. Obviously, the penalty was a massive deciding factor. Moyes pushed on Noble to take the penalty. We talk a bit about United and everything but United on this show, so I just want to focus on that decision from a West Ham point of view. James, as a neutral, yes or no answer. Moyes, was he right to bring on his penalty taker to take that penalty at the death?
From a neutral, obviously disregarding the outcome of it, no, he's not. You can't.
Stu?
He was at the time, yeah.
Interesting. Mark, what are your thoughts on that? We're 50-50 here. Just to, by the way, shift it a bit more in one favour. West Ham have struggled with penalties recently. I believe they missed 6 of the last 10 or something like that, of which Noble didn't take. The other 4 Noble did take. And he pushed Noble on at the end. I think it was the right decision, even though he missed in the end. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it was a correct decision as well. They obviously have had problems, as you said, 6 misses in 10, which is pretty woeful. And I think they missed their last 4 on the bounce. Noble's always been one to put them away and obviously be quite consistent. So I don't disagree with the decision. Unfortunately, on that moment in time, put a bit of pressure on him. He missed it, and it could have gone either way. If he'd have scored it, it would have been an absolute masterclass. So it's just the way it goes, unfortunately.
Would you expect, Mark, just to rephrase the question slightly, if Bruno was on the bench, we had a penalty at Old Trafford, it was 2-1 to City, let's say, and Ollie still had a substitute to make right at the death, would you be screaming for him to throw on Bruno at that point to take the penalty?
No, I think we've got more players that can put the penalties away. I know we had a couple of seasons ago, Pogba and Rashford missed a couple on the bounce. And again, that's just the way it goes. But I think we've got far more hungry penalty takers. Essentially, I think we can rely on 2 or 3, whereas West Ham, other than Antonio, I don't really know who else you'd use. So I wouldn't expect. I mean, the uproar that would cause if Bruno did come on and miss it would be unreal. And obviously, Stu alluded to it there with our fan base, just not worth it, I don't think. But no, I think we've got various players that could step up to the mark.
An interesting debate because it's one of those in hindsight debates, isn't it? Which I always find quite interesting. Shout out to all the guys in the live chat. Good to see you guys in there as well. Keep going. Share the video. Hit a like on it as well, and get in as we discuss all these things. James, cut you off slightly there, but from a West Ham point of view, and we get onto the VAR decisions in a minute. What did you make of their performance? They've had a good enough start to the season, James. They're obviously without Antonio. What did you make of them in the end?
I think obviously you've got to factor in the Antonio sort of absence. I think the fact they were playing without a recognised striker was really the downfall. I think they defensively very solid. They probably should have controlled the midfield a bit better, given the quality of their midfield compared to ours. I think they have got a very, very strong midfield in there. But yeah, I think it was very obvious that they were going to be living off scraps up top. They got into the positions sort of frequently enough for them. Wasn't too frequently, but they were still picking up some really good positions, getting in behind down the line and stuff like that. But you could just tell there was a massive Antonio-sized hole in that front line, and that's what really affected them the most.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they go for it on tomorrow it will be, won't it? With Antonio back in the side, if he is back in the side. He's had his injury problems as well, so I don't think that's a given. I think West Ham will heavily rotate too. It's hammer time. I love that brown night. That's the funniest thing you've ever said, mate. Anyway, let's move on. I want to talk about VAR or VAR. Look, I'm not going to go over all the decisions. As I just said to the guys, I think the Wan-Bissaka one, I think it was anyway, that was offside, so didn't go to VAR. Was it on Yarmolenko, if I remember right? I think if there was an offside, it's a penalty. But I think because it wasn't offside, there's no point in even debating it. It was job well done. But I do want to pick up on the 2 Ronaldo penalty claims. And this is where I've had disagreements with people here slightly. Because on first look, some people have said to me, so I'll put the tweet up here. Some people have said to me that they didn't think the Kufal one on Ronaldo was a penalty, but they thought the Zuma one on Ronaldo was a penalty. For me, it was the other way around. I thought the Kufal one was a stone waller, but the Zuma one wasn't. And I'll tell you why. It's because of the angles of the replays. And this is what really confuses me with the way that clear and obvious comes in, and where I will get into my rant in a minute. Like, I feel like VAR, despite all the progress they've made this season, they've actually just shifted the focus on what clear and obvious is from fouls to handballs, which is just, again, it's ridiculous. You need to solve both problems and not just one of them. Otherwise, the problem's going to, so to speak, persist. The Kufal one for me is interesting because when you watch it first up, it's knee to knee. The player's gone over. Is that a 50-50 or is it a penalty? It's never going to be a free kick in the other direction. It's one or the other. I think then there's another replay from the opposite angle that's a bit more behind Kufal. And you sort of see, by the way, for a guy whose legs have gone in Cristiano Ronaldo, the way he turns his body and runs past Kufal, he literally leaves him for dead to the point where Kufal can't come out of that challenge. The argument that's been raised with me is Kufal tries to remove his leg from that challenge. No, he doesn't. He's too slow. He doesn't get out the way. It's a penalty. And some would argue the ball has gone. Some would argue, oh, but it's knee against knee. It's 50-50. Ronaldo's run into him. Again, this is where VAR needs to get involved in decisions like this. They need to read the run of the footballer, which only really former pros can do, and not an assistant referee sat in Stockery Park or wherever. Ronaldo's run is in direction of the ball, not into the direction of Kufal. He put his leg out. There is nowhere in the rule book that says, if you go in for a challenge, but go to move your leg out and still catch the man, it's not a penalty. Contact's contact. A foul is a foul. That is a foul, and that is a penalty in my books. And I'll come to your guys' thoughts in a minute. The Zuma one on Ronaldo, again, is another one of those where Ronaldo's left Zuma for dead. Whether people still want to make the argument that Ronaldo's got no legs, surely these two penalty shouts show that actually Ronaldo's got freaking legs. For me, this one cannot be given because the ball's gone. For me, Ronaldo's had actually a poor touch there and the ball's gone. He's never getting back onto it. Zuma comes in with a challenge. Zuma does catch him. And for me, it's still a penalty because you've made contact. Do you remember the Rashford challenge last season when the ball goes out of play, but the player took out Ronaldo on the touchline and the penalty was still given because contact was made and it wasn't needed in that time? For me, that's still a penalty because contact is made. And again, it's hypothetical to say that ball is gone, although I still believe the ball is gone. So there's the argument. For me, United should have had two penalties there, and I don't know why we haven't. So I'm going to come to each of you there. I've said my argument. I'll allow you to argue against me and I'll hold my hands up. It's all speculative, but I'm going to come to you first, Stu. If both aren't a penalty, is one a penalty and one not? Because for me, the logic applies to both within the same remit of what a clear and obvious foul is, or error, sorry, clear and obvious error is. What are your thoughts in general on those two decisions?
Yeah, look, at the time, I thought both were pens. I still think both are pens. But actually, I'm going to agree with everything you said because I think you summed it up perfectly. When a defender dangles a leg in front of a forward, you're asking for trouble. Whether you're trying to dangle it to put him off, whether you dangle it to try and pull it away, it's an irrelevance. You're asking for trouble because what Ronaldo did, he saw that leg coming and he was guaranteed it was going to be knee on knee because anyone in this panel would have done exactly the same. You'd have run into his knee. And it was an absolute penalty, that was. I can't understand why Atkinson wasn't asked to go and review it at the screen at that particular time, because if he had, he'd have had no choice but to give the penalty. And you're absolutely right, Ben. The body language of Ronaldo against the body language of Kufal. Kufal was all over the place, really. Ronaldo left him for dead. He was scrambling. And the only way he was going to stop him was to do what he did and dangle his leg. Mm-hmm. Penalty number 2 is a bit more of a grey area. And that is because Ronaldo was already on the way down, or he's already off balance by the time Zuma came in. And the ball was getting away from Ronaldo. He wouldn't have made it, I don't think, if he'd got round Zuma. I think the ball was too far away. But because he was slightly off, if you look at his feet here, his right leg is already pinned into the turf. So he's slightly off off balance. Azuma was taking a huge risk anyway, because when you come in and slide like that, you're going to take a player completely anyway, you know. So there were both penalties. I can kind of see an argument for not giving the second one, but I can't see any argument at all for not giving the Kufal one. The Kufal one was as stonewall as it gets.
I think again, and this is where player logic comes in, and I think any player will say that's a penalty, or anyone who's played the game will say that's a penalty. I think ultimately, yes, there was a time when a striker would go into a player to dictate contact to get a penalty. Of course, Michael Owen was the king of doing just that. But with this one here, again, just look at Ronaldo's head and his eye line. It's directly on the ball. And if you look at the shape of his body and his legs, he's running one way. It's towards the ball. It's not into Kufal. Kufal cuts across him. And I think that's being missed here. I think a lot of people, because it's knee to knee, which 9 times out of 10 are coming together on both parties. Kufal's leg is out. Look at where his back foot is. His leg is out. And I don't know how much you can see that. And maybe I'm getting too stuck into this now. But I just think, again, it's going to go back to the point that we're all going to make here. How VAR is used for clear and obvious errors and go into the screen. Mark, let me come to you. Please share your thoughts on both and what's being said.
Yeah, I think in 3 out of 5 of these weekend reviews, Ben, VAR is always a topic. And I think that kind of points in the direction of the fact that it's still no consistency and there needs to be more consistency. I agree with what Stu said. I think the first one, you know, on a different day, maybe different referee, it could have been given. But I don't think he would have ever got to the ball. And you can kind of understand that one. But I think this one, as you've rightly pointed out, is body language, the way that he's running, the fact that it does look like with momentum, it is taking him out a little bit. And I think that on a different day could be given. Now, my frustration with this whole thing is consistency, as I said earlier. It annoys me that, you know, in some instances they feel it is necessary to check this. They didn't feel at any point on that particular one, not the Zuma one, the one previously with the first one, that they needed to check it. Now, why? What is the reasoning for that? And I saw a tweet the other day by Phil Brown, actually, and he it was to do with a boxing match, and he mentioned the referee himself came out and he wrote a really good, concise reasoning as to why he made the decisions that he did. And it kind of cleared everything up. There were people that didn't agree with it still, but, you know, it was really good to be able to see that someone can come out and sort of hold their hands up for their actions and give a good reasoning why. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to introduce that, but I think a little bit more clarity from the decisions that are made, instead of saying, oh, we got this one wrong, also go in and prove why you feel that this one is correct. But for me, that there should have been a check on that. And I think, you know, it goes to the point with Jurgen Klopp only a few weeks ago to say that United are getting penalties all the time. Since that point, it's almost like they're so concerned about anyone else coming at and painting them in a bad light that they don't want to give any at all. And I think that it's wrong and inconsistent.
100%. And a point was made afterwards as well. You know, it was Ronaldo. If it's another player on the pitch, is that still given a penalty? I mean, I don't know. I've never seen Ronaldo as much of a diver, to be honest. There's bigger divers than him in the game. John, can't also ignore the fact that Wan-Bissaka got away 1-1 as well. It's appalling refereeing. The only thing with that, John, as well, is that it was offside before the phase of play. So it couldn't have been given as a penalty. But ultimately, I do agree, Wan-Bissaka may be lucky that action wasn't taken against him for that challenge, because it wasn't a good challenge, which as well, maybe another debate for another time. What's going on with Wan-Bissaka's tackling at the moment? Is bloody 10 yards off the pace. Final thoughts from you, James. Now, interestingly, what Mark was saying there about the transparency, the referee, I don't know, board, whatever they're called, they review the weekend's decisions, have actually come out and said that the first one should have been reviewed and the decision should have been turned over. I mean, it means jack shit now, but still, the second one still apparently not. Where are your thoughts on both of them?
I think it's quite humorous that they've come out and said it should be a penalty, because I think everyone who has watched a game of football knows it's a penalty, apart from that referee, which makes it all the more worse. I think both are definite penalties. I think if it was the other way around, if that was Harry Maguire taking out Ben Rama for the Zuma one, and then Wan-Bissaka taking out someone, then the whole internet is all over it. Is the two Stonewall penalties, whether they'd have been given or not, is completely different. But the actual attitudes towards them, even in mainstream media, would have been completely different. We would have been seeing, this ref needs to sort himself out, this, that, and the other. But it feels like refs and officials are giving context to black and white decisions. It's either a foul or it's not. And it does feel like you were mentioning earlier about they're considering the player that went over, the team that he plays for, all this. And that's the most worrying thing. Refereeing, whether it's a foul or not, is black and white. The only context should be within the game, not outside of it, not how many penalties this team have had before, not whether this player has a reputation for diving 10 years ago. I think that's the most worrying thing. And we were talking about it earlier, the other day on one of the shows. It is probably the worst standard of refereeing we've probably had in the UK for a long, long time. I think both of those as well, if they're in the Championship without VAR, you go in, the referee's made a huge mistake. Add on to the fact that he could have rectified it using VAR. It's indefendable.
Mm-hmm. But you know what baffles me? And again, it's this grey line between a clear and obvious error and what's not. He gave the handball the time of day, but wouldn't give the actual fouls the time of day. The handball was straight away over to the screen, talking to VAR that this could have been a clear and obvious error. It's hit his hand. Well, ultimately, there was contact. Surely contact is enough to ask the referee to go and view it again, because it could be a clear and obvious error. I don't understand why there's a grey line between the two. The screens need to be used. Yes, we need to be more efficient in making these calls. Yes, the technology needs to be adopted to work well, correct. But you can't just say the ball's hit a hand, go and have a look at the screen, let's determine whether it's a penalty. But hey, there's contact in the box, let's not actually have a look and see if it's not a penalty. Like, it just makes no sense. It's got to make sense from both point of views. So I think that's where the consistency with VAR and the clear and obvious error tagline needs to come into play. But anyway, enough about the weekend and VAR. As Mark says, we seem to talk about VAR every weekend, which just goes to show it's not as good as we all thought it was at the start of the season with the way it was being used. And let's chat about a few of the matches, shall we? The weekend started with a draw between Newcastle and Leeds, and a shock defeat for Wolves. This goes to you, Stu, actually, because we haven't heard from you yet on Newcastle on this show. We've had a lot of chatter around Brucey potentially being the first man to go. He's under a huge amount of pressure there. Home draw against Leeds, good or bad result? And were you shocked by Wolves capitulating against Brentford as well?
Look, I feel a bit for Brucey, actually, because the poison chalice of the Premier League is always going to be Newcastle, and always will be, till either get new owners in or the fans actually realise their place in the pecking order. Newcastle have got some explosive players, but they've got some really, really awful defenders. They don't defend as a unit. Their goalkeeping's not been kind of sharp since Dubravka got injured or whatever's wrong with him at this point in time. And they don't seem to play as a collective unit, which is pretty poor, but they've got some outstanding brilliance there with Saint-Maximin, Callum Wilson when he's fit, and of course Almiron. So they've got some really, really good players. I never thought I'd ever be on a stream and actually turn around and say they're missing Shelvey at the minute, but they are, because Shelvey adds a bit of steel and a bit of calmness into their midfield. And I think once they get him back, then I think it won't be too much of an issue. But they're always going to be mid-table. They're never going to get above that. They're never going to challenge for European spots or anything like that. So I just think the Newcastle fans should just kind of look at where they've been for the last 20 years and kind of just say, look, Brucey, you're doing okay, mate. We're going to back you. With regards to Wolves, I don't quite know what to make of Wolves right now. I don't know about anyone else. I just don't know what to make of them. They've got, Neves isn't playing well. Moutinho's not playing well. Cody is having a poor start to the season. Traore is doing his usual, freight train running, but not really producing. The big loss for them is Jimenez. Jimenez is still playing very much within himself. He's still trying to find that balance of being able to re-find his aggression. and his mental state. And look, everyone can appreciate it must be really, really hard to come back from that type of injury. And he needs a goal. He needs a headed goal, does Jimenez, which sounds strange, but I think he needs to find that confidence. And I think once they do, and you get Neves bubbling a bit more, you get Cody refinding his form, Moutinho finding his form. I think again Wolves will be okay, but you've got to take your hand off to Brentford. What a breath of fresh air they've been. The start of the season
was great as well.
Yeah.
I remember at the start of the season saying he's just a big lump. Well, I just watched him in the first couple of games. It's like there's no way he's up to scratch. He had the performance of his life.
Didn't he
on
really?
Saturday.
Didn't he? He's great. And you look at the other Brentford players that have migrated to the Premier League already, and how well they're doing. So, look, I like Brentford, but I think this manager, I think he's quite a cute manager. I think he's astute. I think he falls into the Portuguese line of managers. Yeah.
Do you know why that is, Stu? It's because it's Portuguese.
Yeah, I know. And I think you'll start to see the best out of Wolves. Probably November onwards. I think it'll just take him a little bit of time just to get it in. Now, people will argue, well, it hasn't taken Thomas Frank time to just to the Premier League, has it? No, it hasn't. But he's had that set of players for 4 years, 5 years. So it's easy to mould and stick together. So, yeah, very, very, very. Wolves are a bit of a strange one.
I think potentially we've already seen the best of Wolves. I know that's a bit contentious, but they literally played so well against Leicester, against United, and against, who else was it? Spurs. So well. Yeah. Didn't have enough up top, like you said, to win the games, but absolutely dominated. And then they scrapped the win, really, against Watford. I mean, I know they won 2-0, but they weren't two, cute flowing goals. They were two scrappy goals. Well, at least the was it Lee one was their new striker towards the end. I think it's in the last couple of minutes or whatever. And then they're against Brentford. They've dominated in possession, but they've created half as many chances against Brentford than they did against United. Didn't get one shot on target the whole game. And we were talking earlier on about controlling a game. Brentford, when they went forward, looked like the better side. You don't have to have overall possession share to control the game. They were limiting Wolves to shots outside the box like we were, and not letting them create anything too telling. So fair play to Brentford. What a win for them to really kickstart their season. A few other games that happened, mainly the 3:00 kickoffs, a ball draw at an Etihad, and a narrow win for Arsenal against Burnley. Mark, look, I know it's a 1-0 win against Burnley. I can't help but feel that is a game that I was expecting Arsenal to lose, and they won it. I think that's a terrific result for them. And that's not me being... I genuinely think that's a really, really good result for them away at Burnley.
Yeah, I totally agree, actually. I don't think it's ever easy to go to Burnley. They're well set up. Sean Dyche, I rate highly. He's just signed a new contract. I think it's a good result, and that's kind of the results. And we said this a couple of weeks ago. Kind of the results that Arsenal need, really. They need to grind out, they need to be dogged and grind some results out, and then hopefully can build some momentum upon that. But yeah, I mean, a good result. There's 2-2 now, and for them, obviously, don't particularly want to see Arsenal win, but I've got a bit of respect for them, and I want them doing better than what they are, really. So hopefully they can pick up from here, really. But as you say, yeah, not an easy place to go to. I think you'll see a lot of teams that will go to Burnley and probably lose narrowly. So they've done well there.
Yeah, and I mentioned City briefly then, James, just quickly, that we're used to them making slow starts, but I still feel like last year their slow start was aided by the fact that so many teams like Manchester United in particular, we had such a ferocious start in some ways, and we had so many players that just reached a peak of fitness way too soon that they tailed off towards the end. So I felt like City banked on that a bit last season when they went on that magnificent run. Surely they can't carbon copy last season again, because last season that run was unreal that they went on. So should City fans be slightly nervous at this point? Or do you think that we've seen enough from City and Guardiola to think, yeah, it'll work out fine for them in the end?
Possibly. I think the big reason for their sort of upturn in form last season coincided perfectly with Ruben Diaz arriving. They lost that game against Leicester literally the day before he signed, and I think they were unbeaten for the next 22 or whatever. So the fact that he's been in and around the team, he's not looked as impressive as he did last season. He looks a lot more mortal, should we say, in terms of the fact that, you know, a lot of players, I saw in the Southampton game, he just completely skipped past a number of times, which you wouldn't have saw last season. Obviously, there's a lot of their squad was involved in Europe, like international competitions, but then a lot of other teams were as well. So you never write City off, you never write Guardiola off, but obviously it's not the worst start either. But it could possibly be a downfall. I think that the thing with the weekend was you expect City, when they drop points, to have been sort of unlucky. It would have been from a good goalkeeper save or whatever, but they'd have been creating chance after chance, and you'd have think, how have they not won that? But that wasn't the case. You know, Southampton gave as good as they got. I don't think City got in behind nearly as much as they'd have liked, and it was just a very pedestrian performance, which I think would be the most worrying thing for Pep. I think dropping points for City is acceptable when you perform in the right way, but I just don't think they did.
There's definitely something not right there at the moment. I've got to be honest, and I'm not quite sure what that is.
I'll tell you, Mark. It's Gundogan and Stones.
Yeah, well, obviously Stone's been out since the beginning, isn't he? I've only just taken him out of my fantasy team actually, but I think you're absolutely right. You know, there are a couple of players in that team that when they don't tick, and they are a bit of an aging squad, really, they don't seem to play particularly well. But I've just noticed that in Pep as well. I just think his whole demeanour is a little bit sort of negative, and the comments that he's making, which isn't very Pep at all. It's just not boding well at all, is it? And I can't listen. Last season, I think it was more to do with lack of pre-season. I think we saw that in Man United, Wolves, and City. Right, they all started very poorly, but I at the moment, City were creating more chances, as James said, and I just think this season it really needs to change quickly for them, and they're not on that honeymoon period with Diaz. And Grealish, you know, he's not exactly lit up the world yet, has he?
No, it's interesting. It's interesting. And we'll see how the season shapes out. But talking about where we're at right this second with a frustrated Pep and a City not firing, Stu, the other two teams that are really challenging United for 21 in 22 is Liverpool and Chelsea. I feel like everyone's talking about Chelsea at the moment for obvious reasons. But Liverpool haven't put a foot wrong at this point so far this season in terms of their performances. I mean, they've drawn against Chelsea, which isn't a mean feat. Are they them two for you at the moment in your favourite book? Like, I mean, I know there's 4 teams that could easily win it this year, but if you're realistically looking at the landscape, I mean, Liverpool and Chelsea are looking better than City right now, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I mean, it's no coincidence with Liverpool that Van Dijk is back. And he shored up their defence, you know, immediately. And they do look good. It looks like Salah, unfortunately, is hungry. He's scoring goals. Mane's scoring goals. Very, very disappointing for young Harvey Elliott in his injury a couple of weeks ago, because he was looking like he was cementing. And he looks at, crikey, what a player he looks. I mean, he could give Foden a run for his money in his technical ability. He just looks a really, really good player. I know a lot of Liverpool fans because obviously I grew up in an era where Liverpool were challenging for the title. So most of my friends are Liverpool fans, and they go there, they're match-going fans. And they were saying last year that without Van Dijk, how disjointed the team was, and they're just talking about one player, and obviously Firmino wasn't firing. But now with Van Dijk being back, Matip seems to have upped his game by all accounts. The two fullbacks are playing well again, if you can call them fullbacks, and more wing backs, aren't they? And I said to my friend about the loss of Wijnaldum, how much that would make an effect, and he said it wouldn't. He said Wijnaldum was good, but it wouldn't make that much of a difference. And actually, I put Liverpool favourites over Chelsea at this point in time because, Ben, you're absolutely right. They're a team that have just gone completely under the radar, sailed through, and they're winning games. And not just winning games, they're winning games very, very comfortably. And I don't think they've necessarily got out of second gear. With regards to Chelsea, it's hard to see where you can get at Chelsea because they just look like an absolute chestnut in terms of thickness and in terms of stability. And when you've got a player like, and we talk about age all the time, don't we? When you talk about a player like Thiago Silva, I think he's 37 next week or turns 37 shortly. He doesn't need to run. And I've said this about centre halves before. He doesn't need to run. He's got that know-how and he's got that wherewithal. He's got that spatial awareness. He knows where to be at the right time. And it's like people talk about Ronaldo with no legs, etc., etc., etc. There are certain players that can go into a dressing room and they can galvanise the squad and they can just look at how they prepare. And Thiago Silva was one of those. And Christensen has come on a long way since Silva joined Chelsea. And of course, Zuma was playing well at that particular time. But you've also got Rudiger. I mean, Jesus Christ, you've got one of the, two of the best centre halves in the Premier League. Rudiger's an absolute man mountain. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't got the stats up. But Chelsea only conceded 1 goal this season in the league.
Well, they haven't conceded. I'm sure they have, but they also haven't conceded from that was from a set piece as well. They haven't conceded from open play.
So from open play, right? So, and when you look at what they're able to do and what he can bring off the bench, I mean, Mount didn't have a particularly good game against Spurs, but I did say on Uncut, the game changed when Kante came on. So just look what Tuchel's got at his disposal. He removes Mount, who is a very, very good player, puts on Kante, and the game completely changes. I think Lukaku adds another dimension, but when you consider, there's two sides to Lukaku, isn't there? There's Inter Milan Lukaku, and there's Manchester United Lukaku. And you see more of Manchester United Lukaku at the moment. Yeah, he scored a couple of goals, but they've still got Saul to bring on. They've got strength in depth, and he's a very, very good manager, is Tuchel. Whether he's a coach or not, I don't know, but he's certainly a very, very good manager. But I think Liverpool are a better rounded squad, and I think Liverpool slightly ahead of Chelsea. People won't agree with me, but I think Liverpool are slightly ahead. But I will say one thing. I'll say one thing to Manchester United fans. We've got a tough October, but these are types of games you should be getting up for. These are the types of games you want to get up for. Fergie's old saying, knock Liverpool off their perch. Well, you want to knock everyone off their perch. And I just think that we're warming up now, and we'll warm up over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Watch the Varane-Maguire partnership flourish. Watch the Ronaldo-Greenwood-Sancho partnership flourish. I know, Ben, you're a massive Sancho fan, and you've probably got, but watch him flourish over the next 2 to 3 games. He needs to play Wednesday night, tomorrow night. Sancho
100%. He needs minutes. Yeah, he needs minutes. Sorry to interject quickly.
That's all right.
I just want to quickly say I completely agree with you. I think that what United have got is a nice, so to speak, spaced out fixtures. They've got a tough period coming out, but then they've got a nice run after that of winnable games, which can be nice because you get yourself up for it for a month. It's a big month coming up, and then you've got some games in and around Christmas and the New Year that you should be winning. Chelsea and Liverpool have got disrupted calendars in terms that they'll face City one week and the next week they'll be away to Brentford or they'll be away to Norwich and little tricky games like that in and around the bigger games, which sometimes are more difficult once you hit the peak of your adrenaline playing City at home to then go away to somewhere like Norwich. It's where mistakes happen and it's where you lose games and drop points. So I think it's going to be quite an interesting run coming up for both teams. We'll learn a lot about Liverpool and Chelsea and United. I think the only team that we're not talking about in that conversation, City, have got I believe Liverpool and Chelsea in the next 3 games. So again, it'd be interesting to see where City are at that point too, putting on their slow starters. You can't lose. They won't be able to lose 6 points. They'll then be 8-9 points away from the top 3 at an early point in the season when all the top 4 have improved. Go on, Mark, quickly interject really, really quickly on Liverpool, mate.
Yeah, I just think they're always one. I was talking to my granddad. He used to follow Liverpool back in the day, and he feels that there's not been enough investment there. There's not enough younger players. They're an Asian squad, and they're always one player away, one injury away from really sort of going downhill. They seem to be completely disgruntled and disjointed if they lose that one player. We saw that with Van Dijk, and I think if you lose a player like Salah, Van Dijk, anyone in the middle as well, even without Wijnaldum now, I think it could cause problems for them. I think they've been, they've gone under the radar because they've not really excited anyone over the summer with any acquisitions, but they've gone on about their business and done pretty good. But again, I think 1 or 2 players and it could end in a dismal spell.
Is it the opposite for Chelsea, James? Because they've got the squad, right?
Yeah, that's what's sort of setting them apart. They've got sort of almost City levels of squad depth that's gone quite under the radar. I think they're my favourites for the title right now, and I think it's very hard to dislike this Chelsea team as well. Rivalries aside,
I'll disagree with that.
Yeah, no, obviously, if you take the United purely as a footballing fan, it's hard to dislike them. You know, it's a squad over the last ever since Conte's been around. It's been a squad sort of that's capable of playing a back three. Tuchel's probably alongside Conte the best at playing a back three as a manager as well. So it seems a match made in heaven. Squad and manager. Impossible to break down defensively, and they've got goals coming from all over the pitch now as well. We've seen a lot of the defenders have scored goals. Kovacic, who never scores, has grabbed a few, and then obviously when that dries up, they've got Lukaku in as well. So I think it's pretty foolproof for Chelsea. I think it's going to take some sort of catastrophe, not catastrophe from a United point, but from their point of view, it will take a bit of a nightmare to really mess it up.
I was thinking about this the other day. What happens when the Tuchel honeymoon ends? That's my thing, because it still very much feels like a honeymoon. But then again, the thought in my head was this Chelsea squad, thanks to Frank Lampard, is actually in a completely different situation to where it has been over the past 6 to 10 years, in terms of the players they've got in the dressing room and the squad that Tuchel's got. And my thinking in my head is, does Tuchel have enough of his players in that dressing room that when the honeymoon period does end, they don't down tools? Because I think we've regularly seen with Chelsea over the past 8 to 10 years that there's been a consistent theme with certain players, and they're usually a similar type of player in terms of their personality and not really having a proper deep bond with the club or an affiliation with the club, that just down tools and they're done. Whereas I think now this Chelsea side, with the likes of Mount, Christensen, who's come up through the ranks there at Chelsea, Hudson-Odoi in and around it, Lukaku again loves the club. He grew up at the club. I think then you've got wise heads in Thiago Silva and Kante. Kante's a massive Chelsea fan. He's always wanted to play for Chelsea. My biggest question mark has been that they got enough heads in and around the dressing room to stable it out when the honeymoon period does end. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But that's my big question mark at the moment. But who said it's going to happen in the middle of this season? Might be a couple of years down the road. But I do genuinely think with the tools that Chelsea give their managers, if Tuchel gets it right and he gets enough Chelsea heads and himself in there, he's already sold the majority of the loan players, by the way, which was a big move that's been overlooked this summer. Chelsea have always had about 90 players out on loan for a season. He's sold most of them this summer. He wants his squad, his players there. He doesn't want all these players out and about on loan and affiliated with the club. If he puts enough of his sauce on this side, Tuchel, I think he could be at Chelsea for years, because he'll always be given the tools to do what he needs to do, and they'll be successful. And that's worrying in one point of view, because it's slightly different to what we expect from Chelsea. But on another side, it could still go totally wrong. Anyway, let's stop talking about Chelsea and Liverpool, because United are going to win the league. And let's quickly move on to the last couple of games. I don't know. Did anyone watch Brighton this weekend? I've got to admit that I missed the Brighton game, but they looked fantastic from the highlights I saw. Still, I don't know if you want to come in.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Graham Potter, actually, because I think he plays football the right way. He's a very attack-minded, but he's obviously very defensive as well. And they've got a group of players. He's slowly but surely. I like what you said about Lampard, actually, Ben. I do want to touch on that, because that's gone completely under the radar. What Lampard did to build that squad completely gone under the radar. People were laughing at him for being sacked, but you're absolutely right. Tuchel's come in with a squad that is balanced, put together methodically. And, Tuchel sprinkled his little players on there. But Lampard is the reason why Chelsea are as strong as they are squad-wise. So you're absolutely right. And leads me on to Potter. Potter's doing something very, very similar on the fifth of a budget that Lampard was working under. And what Potter does, he's a very likable person. He's not a what you would call a grade A manager, because he's not in the papers every week. He's not being photographed every week. He goes to work, he gets on the training ground, and he molds and shapes a group of solid, not outstanding, solid professional footballers. likes of Dunk, Neil Maupay. People took the piss out of him with his Panenka-esque penalty a year ago, 18 months ago. Yesterday, smash, bang, no messing. People that, you've got a group of players that have learned. Solly March has been there for a while. Very, very technically gifted on his left foot. Danny Welbeck finally found a home. Has finally found a home where he's wanted, and they play a style that suits him. He's a brilliant manager, Potter. Brilliant manager. Not yet, but in 2 or 3 years' time, I'd like to see him get a Tottenham or an Arsenal job or somewhere along those lines, take that next step, because I think he's a fantastic manager. I really do. I like him, and I think he's great for the Premier League. As for Leicester, wow, I don't quite know what to say. I don't know what you. It's unusual for me not to have anything to say about somebody, but I'm really perplexed by Leicester. Really perplexed because, Vardy does his usual stuff, and Harvey Barnes, if he concentrated for 90 minutes, it'd be a brilliant talent. But I don't know what to make of Leicester, actually. I'm kind of struggling. I don't see any real pattern of play there.
Stu, I think Leicester have always been a good team, right? But I think the fact that so many of the top teams have been quite poor and inconsistent and haven't necessarily they've had great squads, don't get me wrong. But look at the top 4 this season and the squads those top 4 teams have. They're exceptional. Yeah. I think Leicester have always been in a position where they've been a neutral's favourite because of that, because they've had this underdog mentality. I think the steam train's run out of steam a little bit now, ever so slightly. I think Brendan Rodgers would still build it up and it still go great. But I don't think any of us are sat here now debating whether Leicester are going to get top 4 this season.
No,
I think maybe even top 6. Quickly, just on Leicester, Stu, sorry to butt in on you. It's just we've got to move quickly on time. Again, we spoke about VAR at the start. James, obviously in that game, again, we could look back at this and go, well, it wasn't like Leicester got completely outplayed. They were slightly unlucky in the end, right?
I think I'm not really sure how Brighton won that game from an officiating point of view. Leicester had 2 goals ruled out, but both almost identical goals, headers from corners. One you could maybe argue, but the other one, Harvey Barnes was penalised for offside. Bear in mind, he was nowhere near the ball or the goalkeeper as it was going into the goal. He was deemed to have affected play in some sense. He was genuinely probably 5 or 10 yards away from both. Which was pretty infuriating from a Leicester point of view. And then the other one is a similar sort of thing, But I'll say it quickly, just to back up Stu's point. I think Graham Potter would have been the better choice for Tottenham rather than Nuno Espirito Santo. I think he deserved that job, given what he's done. And I think time will tell that he will get with that calibre of job soon.
I agree on the logic. I just think the Tottenham squad's awful. And it's not got a balance there. I just don't feel like Potter would have been able to do much with that squad as it is right now for the football he likes to play. That's just my personal opinion. I think Potter's a fantastic manager. And I think you're right. I was screaming, Potter needs to get that Spurs job. But he needs to get that Spurs job with a transfer window.
Yeah. Not
with no transfer window and having to scrape up a Harry Kane situation and have players like the Celso and Ali, who basically, I don't know where they both play. I don't have a clue where their strongest positions are. It's a very odd one, but I do agree with you, James. I think he should have got the job, but he needed the window. Without a window, and with the window Spurs have had, there's no way he succeeds with this squad.
Was he in for that job, was he? Or was he
you never know, do you? I think Sean Dyche was more strongly linked with that job than Graham Potter was, which is bloody weird. One final thoughts, some final thoughts on Villa. Not had the best start to the season, but absolutely wiped the floor of an unbeaten Everton side completely. Leon Bailey, Mark, looks like some little player, doesn't he? He looked really, really good when he came off the bench. What do you think? Is this the start of a Villa surge now? Are they looking at mid to top half this season, do you think?
Yeah, I think they can probably push on from where they were last season. I think what we've seen with Villa over the last few seasons, at least, is they recruit pretty well. I think they've got a good recruitment department, and obviously the loss of Jack Grealish is going to be massive. But I think they've invested very well in Danny Ings, Leon Bailey. We were linked with him as an alternative to Sancho, and I think you'll remember rightly, we all agreed he would be a good alternative. So I'm not surprised by that. I'm not surprised by his impact in that particular game, and they need to push on from here. You know, they've got all the tools, they've got the players, they've got the right sort of board backing and all of that, and they need to aim higher. I believe, I feel that they're more than capable of that. They've just sort of started, you know, when you bring in new players and you lose a player as massive as Jack, it's going to take a little bit of time to integrate everybody and get it ticking again. And that's the first few games, but I think they can really push on from now.
It's going to be an interesting next couple of weeks in the league. We'll be back hopefully Monday at 1 o'clock. Subscribe to All for United, hit that like button. We're going to have a bonus 60-second round now. I'm literally going to put a 60-second time on my phone. We've had some questions coming in the live chat. I'm going to come to each of you with a question, but you cannot go over 60 seconds. Okay, guys? Some precise answers. James, I'm coming to you first. Henry's put in the live chat, we need to talk about Harry Kane's attitude. The model professional's throwing his toys out the pram and looks disinterested. James, what do you make of Harry Kane? Lots of calls after the game that he should have been subbed. He didn't play well at all. He also played on the left-hand side, which was freaking weird. What did you make of Kane on Sunday?
Bad situation. Obviously, he could be doing more as a captain. He should be doing more, and it's a situation he's probably got himself into by signing the contract. But I think he's been let down by this club for a number of years now. He's one of two of the best strikers in the world, and he's playing for the 8th best team in England, and he has been for his whole career. It's not fair on him. I can see why he feels that way, but it shouldn't spill over onto the pitch at all.
Nice and precise. Look at that. This guy does journalism. Stu, let's come over to you. Your question. I saw it in the live chat earlier. I can't remember who put it. Jesse Lingard, we need to discuss the fact he didn't celebrate his goal. What did you make of that, Stu? I know you would have gone mental. The top would have been off and everything, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't agree with players not celebrating goals, just because they play for that particular club. Get celebrating. You're playing for Manchester United. You're not playing for West Ham. I understand your affinity with West Ham, but I'd have had the top off. I'd have done the knee slide. I'd have done everything. That goal was brilliant. You have to celebrate it.
I can't wait to do a watch along with Stu. Can you imagine? It's gonna be great. Final question for Mark. Let's get a behind the scenes look here. For Ian Travels, what does the dog think? Mark, you've had a nightmare. You've had a howler, some would say, during the show. Your dogs have been on one.
Very, very good. Yeah, I have had a howler. She's eating something, is now hiccuping consistently. So she doesn't have a lot to say at the minute, mate. And honestly, I don't really have that many sort of deep in thought conversations with her, so can't give you that one.
Oh, fair enough, mate. Fair enough. Look, guys, you're gems. James, Mark, Stu, I appreciate you guys always, as I appreciate all of you All for United hosts and contributors. That is a weekend review. We do this every Monday lunchtime usually, so join us at 1 o'clock British Standard Time, although the clock's going back soon, so we'll be going to GMT again on Monday as we look back at a packed weekend of Premier League action. We're 12:30 kickoff Saturday, and we're not even on telly. It's all because of the festival going on, isn't it, in Manchester? So that'll be an interesting one. For now, Viva Ronaldo, 21 in 22. We're going to win the Champions League and all that other shit that we say on these streams. Take it easy. Bye for now.